They're not going to foul. Gamecocks are going to dribble out the clock. South Carolina is back where they belong. The Gamecocks are in the Final Four for the 4th consecutive year and 6th time in 10 seasons. Gamecocks knock off Oregon State 70-58. We're headed to Cleveland. The Gamecocks are on the way to the Final Four. Crowd on their feet. Celebration around the bench. The Gamecocks hold off the 12th-ranked Beavers. And the season continues. For the 4th straight year, the Gamecocks are in the Final Four.
Our guy Brad Muller on the call yesterday up there in Albany is, yes, indeed, South Carolina women 4th straight Final Four appearance, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, adding to the already great legacy of Dawn Staley and her time here at South Carolina, as they are in pursuit of a 3rd national championship in her tenure coming up this weekend on the road in Cleveland. Welcome back in, and as the Extra Point, Tyler Head along with you, Cap and Dave, producing on the other side of the glass. And when you talk about this women's basketball program, Final Fours are expected. Like, that is the bare minimum that most of the people in this fan base expect on a year in, year out basis, just given how good they are. And then that's a great place to be, because there are so many other programs around the country that would look at making the Sweet 16 and saying, wow, that's amazing. What an incredible year. We didn't get to the Elite Eight, or we didn't get to the Final Four. That's all right. We still had a great year, and we're going to build off that. For South Carolina, like to a lot of people, this upcoming weekend in Cleveland is where it gets real, finally. Because everything else, yeah, of course they went undefeated in the regular season. Of course they won the SEC won the SEC tournament. Of course they made it through the first couple of rounds of the tournament. Now it's in the Final Four. Okay, now business is going to pick up. I'm not saying that's a right way to think, but I'm just saying that's how a lot of people view this program, is that it's just the expectation to be in that final group of teams as you get in to the last weekend of the women's college basketball season. And it's always going to be a grand accomplishment, but I think even more so this year specifically, because you look at the team that Dawn Staley ended up taking this year, because we didn't know a whole lot about this team. Well, we did, not that we didn't know a whole lot, but we were unsure of some things coming into the season in regards to this team, given everything that was lost a season ago. We'll go with cut number 4 here, Dave. Here is what Dawn Staley had to say yesterday after the win over Oregon State about getting this group to the Final Four, as well as learning from their trip there a season ago.
Just proud because we beat the odds. I mean, the odds said that we weren't. We shouldn't make it back to the Final Four. Just proud of our team and for them believing in themselves. They created a certain level of chemistry and culture, and they stuck with it. And then they allowed us to coach them, and they trusted us to coach them, even when it didn't feel good to them personally at different times of the season. And then overall, I just think that God has a funny way of dealing with people, and I'm one of his. And for us to lose the way we lost last year, and for him to bring us to this point today, makes me believe a little bit deeper, and it strengthens my faith in who he is. Because I mean, it's I don't know what the Bible verse is, but I know that when you're at your worst and your weakest moments, he's at his best. And he started working on that the day that buzzer sound last year during this time. So I am proud of our team, and I don't want to ever not give God the glory for giving us uncommon favor.
She speaks about the odds there, and it is funny in hindsight to hear say the odds were stacked against a team like South Carolina that's become a power program in women's college basketball. But compared to where they've been in the past couple of seasons, the expectations were lower from a national perspective going into this year. And I'll say rightfully so. As we talked about so many times, you lost quite literally one of the best graduating classes women's basketball has ever seen, specifically here at South Carolina with the freshies a season ago. And yes, you had a lot of women that were on the team the past couple of years and last season specifically that you knew were going to be stepping up into bigger roles like Camila Cardoso, like Raven Johnson. But you didn't know how much that was going to translate and how good they could be. As we've talked about plenty of times, this team was projected at, or was put at 6 in the preseason AP poll. That's still really darn good. That basically means the voters say, hey, we think you're going to make it to the Elite 8, but not the Final Four. And again, there are hundreds of programs across the country that would kill to even be thought of being a team before the season started that could make it the Elite 8. But for South Carolina, that is that's a lowered level of expectation than what we've come to expect. And, I think we learned pretty quickly right when the season got started, and you're beating the likes of Notre Dame, you're beating North Carolina, teams like that early on in the regular season, like, oh, this team's good. And in some ways, this team might actually be better than they were a season ago, especially when you talk about how much more dynamic and multiple they are when it comes to what they can do on offense. And again, even as the season was going along, we were like, this team's good. And this team's still capable of being in the mix for the national championship. I don't know if we saw undefeated, though, because that was what last year's team was chasing. They'd won the national championship a season ago, and they made it a point going into last year that, hey, we're pursuing perfection. We want to be a team. We want to do what we haven't done so far here at South Carolina, which is going undefeated wire to wire and winning the national championship. And they came so close to doing it before falling to Iowa State in the Final Four. And not that that's not the goal of obviously every team going into the season is to win every game and win the national championship, but we didn't really know how realistic of a goal that was going to be for South Carolina, given all the turnover and given all the new things this team is going to be dealing with in 2023 and 2024. But here we are. They are 2 games away. They can beat either Iowa or LSU on Friday night and then beat whoever they end up facing on Sunday. They beat NC State on Friday night or beat whoever's coming in from the other side of the bracket on Sunday, then we're talking about throwing a parade this time next week. And they would be able to lay claim to having that undefeated national championship season. That being said, despite the fact that they are the lone undefeated in women's college basketball and have been for quite a while, in a way, this team's kind of been flying under the radar a little bit. In fact, Dawn Staley talked about that yesterday as well. Let's hit number 11 here, Dave.
I don't know, but I like it. I really do. Like, go ahead, take the spotlight and put it somewhere else. Let this team continue to thrive in the space that they're given, and hopefully at the end of the day, next week this time, I'm hoping that we give a lot of people a lot to talk about. But it's like that. I'm looking forward to tomorrow night's game. Now that we've won, I'm going to sit back and I'm going to enjoy it like everybody else. Like probably millions and millions of people are going to tune into that game. I'm going to be one of them. I don't have a Nielsen ratings in my house, but you can count me in to watch the game tomorrow night.
And she's obviously talking about, LSU and Iowa, as well as Southern Cal and UConn playing tonight to, again, decide who's going to be on the other side of the bracket when we're talking about the Final Four coming up this weekend. And it's weird to say that, your undefeated number 1 team in the country is flying under the radar, but from a storyline perspective, what are people talking about? They're talking about Angela Reese. They're talking about Kim Mulkey. They're talking about Caitlin Clark. They're talking about Juju Watkins. Like so much of the conversation is not revolving around what South Carolina is doing. And let's be honest, when you talk about a team that has won multiple national championships, that was undefeated at this point a season ago, from a national perspective, it's probably not as interesting to people. So it's just not getting talked about as much. And as Dawn Staley mentioned right there, she loves it. that's a way to put a chip on the shoulder of this team to say, hey, guess what? Nobody's giving you the respect you deserve, whether you believe that or not. And again, we see this with the high-level coaches. Look at Kirby Smart and those kind of guys in college football, and Don Staley here in women's basketball, to be able to say, hey, nobody believes in you, even though a lot of people do believe in this team. Whatever motivating factor they can come up with, whatever puts a chip on the shoulder of their team, they'll use to their advantage. And South Carolina is certainly, certainly going to do that. With this weekend being Final Four weekend, it is also our 107.5 The Game annual golf tournament coming up this Friday at the Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia. If you want to take part, it's $400 for a foursome, $200 for a pair, 10 a.m. shotgun start out there at Charwood. We're going to have giveaways like USC baseball tickets, Carowinds tickets, concert tickets, scrap your passports, and more. If you want to take part, give Charwood a call at 803-755-2000 to register. Again, 803-755-2000 to register. Hopefully we see a lot of you out there at Charwood Golf Club in West Columbia coming up on Fridays. We'll get your Final Four weekend truly kicked off with a great time out there at Charwood. Coming up, a new feature here on the Extra Point, diving into some very specific stats from the weekend. Don't want to miss that. Coming up next right here on the Extra Point, here on The Game. Oh, it was a beautiful weekend here in Columbia. Hopefully you got to spend a lot of time outside for your Easter holiday with friends and family. And if you did, you probably were maybe looking at your home's foundation as well, as now we're getting into nicer and nicer weather. But you should always be aware of your home's foundation, especially if you start to notice some problems around your house that might be signs of larger issues. Things like cracks in your exterior brick, cracks in walls or above windows and door frames, doors and windows that might be a little bit sticky, uneven or bouncy floors, cracks over your garage door. Again, all these things could be signs of serious foundation issues. If you notice any of them, you need to check out our friends at Canty Foundation Specialist. Go online to cantyconvicta.com. Again, that's cantyconvicta.com to schedule an appointment for our friends over at Canty Foundation Specialist. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head with you on this Monday morning as we look back on the weekend that was across all of college basketball, not just the women's, but the men's action as well, as we do have the men's Final Four set. And it is time to talk hardwood thanks to our friends over at Georgia Pacific. We're going to dive in and highlight some key players from over the weekend that were a big part of why their teams were able to pick up victories and punch their respective tickets to the Final Four. And we'll start off locally right here with none other than the South Carolina women's team, as again, they made it to their fourth straight Final Four. And when we talk about yesterday's game against Oregon State, one of the biggest key factors for South Carolina was none other than Ashlyn Watkins. 8 points, 14 rebounds, 4 blocks, all in 27 minutes of action yesterday, taking on the Oregon State Beavers. And this is something that we've come to expect. Hell, her nickname is Ashlyn Swatkins for a reason. She is very good from a defensive standpoint and also puts in some really good offensive performances as well. But for me, the thing that really sticks out about what Ashlyn Watkins did yesterday is it was a follow-up to maybe what wasn't her best game against Indiana on Friday night. In the loss to the Hoosiers, she got just 4 points, 3 rebounds, and just 1 block in 19 minutes of action against Indiana. Also committed 3 personal fouls in that game. So it wasn't her best performance. She self-admitted it was not her best performance after the game. And as we've seen other times this season, I'll go back to the SEC tournament, a game that we've talked about a lot. This morning is the game against Tennessee, where South Carolina eked out the last-second victory thanks to Camila Cardoso's, miracle three-pointer. Ashlyn Watkins did not have her best game in that contest. 6 points, 5 rebounds, only 1 block in that contest with 4 personal fouls. So got herself in foul trouble in that one. And the next game out against LSU in the championship game, she rebounded and had a much better performance. Now, again, the points and rebounds about the same, but the blocks, 5 blocks in that game against LSU, which again was a really key factor in South Carolina picking up the 7-point victory in that game. So again, when you talk about the difference between Friday night and Sunday for Ashlyn Watkins, proved to be a big benefactor. Again, those blocks turning into turnovers, obviously a big key factor in South Carolina picking up the win. So a great weekend, or a great Sunday performance overall for Ashlyn Watkins. And she's obviously going to be a huge factor for South Carolina if they're going to go on and win the national championship here over the course of the next 2 games. We'll transition over to the men's side of things as their Final Four is officially set, and one team that shouldn't shock anyone that they have punched their ticket is none other than the Purdue Boilermakers. After their win yesterday, taking down Tennessee in the Elite Eight. And, if I was ever to pick a great time to have a career-worthy performance, it would probably be pretty deep in the NCAA tournament, specifically in the Elite Eight, if I was in a position to help take my school to their first Final Four in 44 years. And that's exactly what Zach Edey did yesterday with his performance for the Boilermakers over the Volunteers. 40 points, a career high, 16 rebounds in 39 minutes of action. If you haven't watched Zach Edey a lot this season, he does not leave the court a whole lot. And these past 2 games against Tennessee and Gonzaga really never left the court, playing 39 minutes and 38 minutes respectively. And look, he's a big man, 7 foot tall, 300 pounds, according to ESPN. Dude's an absolute monster, and he had the ability to take this game over against what we know is a very, very good Tennessee team. And that's what really sticks out to me is about his performance. It's not that he went out there and played out of his mind, but he helped pick up where Purdue was lacking. Purdue is legitimately the best three-point shooting team in the entire country. They went out there and were 3 of 15 from beyond the arc yesterday against Tennessee, which is their worst performance of the entire season. Meanwhile, Tennessee, another very good three-point shooting team, proceeded to make 11 of their three-point shots yesterday. So Zach Edey really put this team on his back yesterday, quite literally scored more than half the points that that Purdue had yesterday. And again, a game where their offense was not as effective as it usually is in the style that it likes to play by shooting those shots from beyond three. So Zach Edey, again, put the team on his back, put in an amazing performance, and has now got Purdue back to the Final Four for the first time in a very long time. And also you add to this the story of Purdue bouncing back from what they did a season ago. They've almost completed the Virginia comeback, where you get bounced by a 16 seed in the first round one tournament and then proceed to tear through the next tournament in pursuit of a national championship. And Purdue just 2 wins away from accomplishing that feat. This upcoming weekend out there in Phoenix, in the Final Four. And again, so much of it's going to depend on what Zach Edey is able to do. And the folks up there in West Lafayette, Indiana, are very thankful for him this morning because he is the key reason why this team made it to the Final Four after their performance yesterday against LSU. And one more, sticking on the men's side of things, it's hard to quantify a Power 5 team as being a Cinderella, but North Carolina State is about as close as we've got to a Cinderella left in this thing, being a number 11 seed. We followed their journey, the remarkable journey of where they entered the ACC tournament, knowing they had to win every single game there and claim the championship to just make it to the NCAA tournament. And it's one thing to make a tournament like that and then get bounced in the first round or two where we can all say, oh, that's a great story, and give them their standing ovation as they walk off the court. No. NC State had other ideas. This team has been on an absolute tear since having their backs up against the wall at the start of the ACC tournament. They took down Duke handily yesterday to punch their ticket to their first Final Four since 1987, and so much of that success that's come from them not only through this tournament, but this season has been on the back of our big man, DJ Burns, the South Carolina native himself from just up the road in Rock Hill, former Tennessee Volunteer that has transferred in and is such a huge part of what's made the Wolfpack so successful over these last couple weeks, in addition to DJ Horn as well. They like to call themselves the DJ Booth. But yesterday against Duke, 29 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists in 29 minutes. And again, that's not a shocking performance by DJ Burns. He's been the team's leading scorer this entire season, or most of this entire season at least, but it's when he made those points that really sticks out to me, because he scored 21 of them in the second half to help North Carolina State have a surge of 55 points in the second half to pick up the win against Duke. And it's easy to think, most of those points must have come from shooting fouls at the end of the game. No, 3 of them did. He was 9 of 11 from the field in the second half yesterday. Like, really, really took the game over, and again is a huge reason why North Carolina State is now playing in the Final Four after looking like they were dead in the water and their season was going to come to an end in the early stages of the ACC tournament. They were tied with Louisville with a couple of minutes to go in that game. Had the miracle 3-point shot against UVA in the semis there. Incredible story. And again, DJ Burns, a big reason why they've gotten this far. And that is Talking Hardwood. Thanks to our friends over at Georgia Pacific, we will continue to highlight many more great players and their stat lines going through these next couple of weeks. We'll come back. We'll wrap up hour number 1 of The Extra Point. Big story dropped this weekend, and I won't lie to you, I was a little bit disappointed. We'll dive into what that was and why coming up. It is The Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you, Captain Dave, producing on the other side of the glass on your April Fool's Monday here on The Game.
I hadn't read that trash. I'm not going to read it. That's why I hired lawyers. The lawyers will review it, and when this season is over, they'll give me a call and say, this is our next step. Reading that stuff.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you, Captain Dave, producing on the other side of the glass. Wrapping up hour number one, the one and only Kim Mulkey over the weekend as LSU defeated UCLA in the Elite Eight to, the Sweet 16. They will be taking on LSU or Iowa coming up tonight in the Elite Eight to try and punch their ticket to another Final Four as they are trying to defend their crown of the national championship from a season ago. But all last week, anybody was talking about was Kim Mulkey and an article that was set to be released by the Washington Post that, from all indications, sounded like it was going to be pretty bad and something that might shed some new light on Kim Mulkey in a very, very negative way. And Dave, I don't know about you, but when something gets hyped up a lot over a period of time, I really expect the payoff to be good. And look, I read the article about Kim Mulkey when it came out on Saturday. In fact, Jeff and I were reading it out at the Carolina Cup when it dropped on Saturday morning. And here's the thing. I didn't really learn a whole lot new about Kim Mulkey, and nothing about it was indicting or damning or anything like that. It was just like, yeah, I kind of already knew this stuff.
Do you think she knew that there was going to be nothing to it, and she just wanted to, I don't know.
Maybe. And look, Kent Babb, who's the one that wrote the article, very well written article. And
yeah, from USC, by the way.
Yeah, that's right, from USC. I did learn about her backstory and her growing up and the relationship they had with her father and a sister and all that kind of stuff. So that information was new, but there was nothing incriminating, I guess, because that's what the expectation was. And I feel like Kim Mulkey's maybe almost kind of the reason why we thought that. You know what I mean? Because we get the inklings that this article is going to come out last weekend, and Kim Mulkey immediately tries to attack it head on, saying, if they write a hit piece about me, I'm suing and I'm luring it up and all that kind of stuff. And I guess that kind of raised our expectations, oh man, well, if she's saying all this stuff, they must really know something about her that's bad. Something terrible is going to come to light, and LSU's going to have to weigh if they keep Kim Mulkey, if they fire her, or whatever they're going to do. And then, we knew the stuff about when she was at Baylor and the situation with Brittany Griner and how she's maybe not treated some of her players in the best way and all that kind of stuff. But again, if you've been paying attention for any length of time, you probably already knew that.
Yeah, exactly. And, we're all expecting some big scandal and everything.
Yeah.
It was it's like a Tinder date, You expect something great out of it, and you go oh my God, when's this going to end?
I don't want to think about Kim Mulkey and Tinder date in the same sentence, but you bring up a really good point because, it raises the level of expectation. Again, I think Kim Mulkey might be guilty of this more than Kent Babb himself, because Kent Babb didn't hype up the article. He's the one that wrote it, and I think it was Pat Forty of Yahoo or Sports Illustrated. I can't remember who he works for now. I think he was the first one to tweet something out last weekend hey, article coming out about Kim Mulkey, watch out for this one, but didn't tell us what it was going to be, what it was going to be about, and it just kind of took on the life of its own. And again, I think Kim Mulkey's own comments didn't help in her regard. I think she was trying to downplay it, ended up hyping up a little bit more, but at the end of the day, I was just nothing crazy, nothing incriminating. I think the Los Angeles Times article was more interesting because that was not a hit piece necessarily, but very much was trying to paint LSU as being the bad guys, which to a degree that they are. And obviously LA, given the fact they're taking on UCLA, that was more of a biased written type of article. And she had more of a problem with that one than she had with the Washington Post article that garnered so much attention in the week leading up to it.
Yeah. Did you already have a Washington Post subscription, or did you do the trial thing?
So it let me read it for free.
It did.
I was kind of worried. I was like, oh, am I going to have to do a one-time thing or pay for a month of it? But when I clicked on it, it let me read it for free.
Oh, there you go.
I had to have a subscription to it when I was in college because I had a professor that would do news quizzes once a week. And the problem was Like, it could be over literally anything that happened in news across the world. So you never really knew what to expect. So I had to subscribe to the Washington Post and get like their like email blast every single morning on like what the main headlines of the week or the weekend were. I didn't do too well on those news quizzes. Fortunately, that professor did like the curve grading thing where he took like the class average, and if you were below that, you got bumped up to whatever the class average was. Because let me tell you, I was probably below that more often than not.
You know, they had a TV show on ETV here, run out of USC. It was called High School News Quiz, done by a professor down there.
Wow.
And he'd bring in contestants, and they would compete against each other. It was pretty good.
I'm not the most newsy person, so that was not necessarily my strong suit. But yes, that was the last time I had a Washington Post subscription was 7 years ago. So I was not going to pay for a new one. If nothing else, I could have gone on Reddit and somebody would have skimmed the article and given all the high points. So I was prepared, but fortunately I was able to read it for free. But again, nothing crazy, nothing I didn't feel like I already knew about Kim Mulkey for the most part at the end of the day.
So who are you want to win tonight?
That's an interesting question. I want the revenge of being able to take Iowa on. And man, playing a team for a third time in a season, tough to beat.
Very.
Hour number 2 coming up. 10 o'clock. Welcome back in. Hour number 2. It's the Extra Point. Tyler Head with you on your Monday morning. Hopefully you and your family had a great Easter weekend. Hopefully you got to take in plenty of Gamecock sports as well for a last hour. Talk plenty about the women as they punch their ticket to yet another Final Four. And we'll take on NC State coming up on Friday night for the right to return to the national championship game for the first time in 2 seasons. And again, the rest of the women's bracket will be decided coming up later tonight. You got LSU and Iowa coming up first, and then Southern Cal and UConn to wrap up the night to determine the other side of the bracket for the women's Final Four coming up this weekend in Cleveland. You also had baseball in action, taking on Alabama on the road in Tuscaloosa. A series got started last Thursday. We talked about that game on on Friday morning. Then you had your final 2 games on Friday night and then Saturday afternoon. And if this team is so interesting this season, and I feel like it's one of those teams that you truly can't feel confident one way or the other until that 27th and final out happens. And Saturday was a perfect example of that. So I'm leaving the Carolina Cup. Again, it's about 4 o'clock before I finally get in the car and start driving, the 40, 45 minutes back from Camden. And the baseball game, the third game against Alabama, is in the late stages, 8th inning, 7th, 8th inning, whatever it may be. So I'm driving, and South Carolina has their, their 9 to 5 lead in the late stages of this game. And I shouldn't have done this because I've played baseball my entire life, and I know how quickly things can turn. But South Carolina is commanding a 5-run lead in the top of the the bottom of the 9th inning, the top of the 9th inning. And I thought to myself, well, there's no way Alabama can come back, right? South Carolina should have this one in hand. Silly me for thinking that, because the Braves game had just started. They were playing the Phillies on our sister station, ESPN 1320 WISW. I said, I'll flip over to that and listen to the start of that game as I'm driving. So I flip over, listen to a few minutes of that, and something in my mind said, you should probably flip back over to that South Carolina game. And lo and behold, at that point in time, it was 9-8. And I'm thinking, oh boy, this got a lot more interesting than I thought it was going to. And again, that's silly of me for thinking that, because Alabama had scored 7 runs in 1 inning against South Carolina the night before. But again, this is truly a team that you don't know what it's going to be like until the game is truly truly over. And when it's all said and done, the weekend wasn't the best, as you did lose 2 out of 3. Similarly to the Ole Miss series a couple weeks ago, you did managed in the weekend on a high note by winning game number 3. So at the end of the day, you didn't get swept. So if there's any kind of silver lining to it, there's there's that at least. But I go back to a conversation that we were having on Friday, where I pointed out the mistakes that South Carolina made in the field in that Thursday night game that Carolina ended up losing by, lo and behold, 1 run. And you can go back to specific points in that game and say, well, if South Carolina doesn't do this, this, and that, then they win this game. And I said over the course of the weekend, that was going to be very glaring. And it ended up being that way. Because if South Carolina corrects 2 of the mistakes that they make on Thursday night, and the rest of the weekend still follows suit, then you win the series as opposed to losing it. And, does one game kill you at the end of the season? Not necessarily, but it adds up. And as I mentioned, South Carolina can't continue to make the mistakes at the clip they've been making them. Again, on the lower end of the SEC when it comes to errors this season, if they want to be successful overall in the conference when it's said and done. Winning on the road is tough enough in the SEC. And we've seen home teams heavily favored. We've seen things tilt heavily in the favor of home teams through the first couple of weekends of SEC play so far. So the last thing that you want to do is let a game slip through your fingers, like we saw South Carolina do on Thursday and nearly saw them do on Saturday. Thankfully, they were able to hold on and, able to get that victory. Friday night's game was very much an example of South Carolina not being able to sustain success at the plate. And when you look at a team scoring 6 runs, it's easy to almost think that you had consistency throughout the 9th innings, or at least multiple innings of good work to lead to those 6 runs. That wasn't exactly the case with South Carolina, as all 6 of those runs, as well as all their hits, came between the 5th and the 6th inning. They got blanked the other 7. Not consistent enough. They were still in the game, but SQ had to get pulled early, and you brought in Matthew Becker. Now, Becker has starting experience, but for the most part this season, he's been a guy that's been coming in relief, working a handful of innings, not having to go very, very deep into these games in terms of, what's being asked of him. And I'll give him credit. He was doing a very fine and respectable job in this game on Saturday, but as he got deeper and deeper into it, things started to slip a little bit. And again, he's the guy that hasn't been asked to pitch in long relief a whole lot this season, and that ended up biting him, the deeper and deeper this, this game went. And the 8th inning started to get away from him. They bring in Parker Marlott, and they just could not stop the bleeding in that 8th inning, which is when Alabama just went on the run and scored those 7 runs. And Marlott obviously ends up finishing the game off, in the 8th. But again, when the offense wasn't doing anything outside of the 5th and the 6th, guess what? You weren't going to come back and win that game. And, South Carolina ends up falling, 13-6 in game number 2 out there in Tuscaloosa. And as I mentioned, they were able to end the series at least on a high note with picking up the win on Saturday. And hey, credit where it's due. For the first time this season against a Power 5 opponent, South Carolina was finally able to win a 1-run game. They lost 5-4 in both those games against Clemson earlier on in the season. They lost the 1-run game to Ole Miss, and now finally, as well as the 1-run game to Alabama on Thursday night, and now finally, with the 9-8 victory, they're able to walk away with that 1-run win on Saturday. But again, oh boy, it got really close for comfort there. Sweating a lot in those final moments of that game, because it really, really looked like South Carolina was about to blow that. And especially when you have the bases loaded situation where, you have the 2 runners on and the ball gets put in play and Talmadge LeCroy runs up and fields the ball, but seemingly does not have a play to make, doesn't have an out to make. And at that point in time, and yes, there were 2 outs on the board, you're thinking, man, this is about to get blown wide open. South Carolina's going to lose this game. Heads up play by what? Tippett to be able to come in behind the runner. LeCroy able to get it to him. They're able to get the out at third after the runner had kind of run past the base and was teasing potentially, running home there. But LeCroy able to get him out at third, and South Carolina was able to escape with that victory, because again, it almost ended up going the other way. And I'm somebody that has sung the praises of Garrett Gainey, and rightfully so. But man, these past couple of outings for him have just been rough. Thursday night, in 1 1/3, gave up 4 hits to 1 run. At the end of that game. Now, again, he was not helped out by the defense necessarily, because there were some mistakes being made out there. But definitely one of his rougher outings there in Thursday night's game, and then comes in Saturday and is, the one on the mound when a lot of those runs are being scored. 1 2/3 innings, 5 hits, 4 runs, and just 2 strikeouts. Veach was able to finally come in and help them get that third out there, but Garrett Gainey just could not stop the bleeding. And it's one of those things where when he comes in here, maybe not necessarily everybody had a great notebook on him, and through the start of the season was dealing. I mean, just great performances left and right, minus that 1 home run that ended the game against Clemson. But now that we're getting deeper and deeper into SEC play, I do wonder if the league is starting to catch up with him a little bit. Now, look, Alabama's a great offensive team, and we knew they were going to get their hits and they were going to get their runs coming into the weekend, but I certainly had a lot of confidence that Garrett Gainey could continue to be that lockdown type of guy that has been so effective in closing games out for South Carolina. Unfortunately, that was not the case for him over the course of the weekend. So hopefully he gets those things corrected and can look a lot better when Texas A&M comes to town this upcoming weekend for your 4th series of the SEC season. But again, at least you didn't get swept, so there's that. Escape with at least 1 victory. We'll see how critical that is when the regular season does indeed come to an end. Want to remind you once more about the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway. It's been going on all baseball season long. Still haven't given away a winner. I've lost count at the amount of bases loaded situations we've had with South Carolina hitters coming up to the plate. And every time it happens, I'm thinking, this is going to be it. This is finally when we're going to be able to get somebody a lot of money through Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union. And yet it just has not quite happened yet. $25 getting added to the pot each and every game. And when a Gamecock hitter finally rips one of these Grand Slams, it's going to happen at some point. Like, it just has to, right? You could be the lucky winner of all that money. Just go online to 1075thegame.com each and every week. Register for your chance to win the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway. Pot is currently at $700. Team in action next, taking on Georgia Southern coming up on Wednesday. 7 o'clock first pitch pregame coverage starting at 6:45. And again, go online to 1075thegame.com. Register for your chance to win the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union. We'll jump back in to basketball. The men's Final Four officially set. We'll take a look at all 4 of the teams and their respective journeys to get to the Final Four coming up this weekend out there in Phoenix. That's coming up. It is The Extra Point. I'm Tyler Head along with you, Captain Dave, producing on the other side of the glass on your Monday morning on The Game.
when Zach came back, right? So all these guys have played so hard and worked on their game and put a lot of time into it, and we had to sit in it. You know, we had to take it. And sometimes when you sit in it and you're honest with yourself and you take it, some great things can happen.
Welcome back in. It's the Extra Points Hour ahead with you on this Monday morning as we look back on a crazy weekend of college basketball as the men's Final Four is set for this upcoming weekend out there in Phoenix. That was the voice of Purdue head coach Matt Painter yesterday after the Boilermakers beat Tennessee, punched their ticket to their first Final Four in 44 years, and obviously the first one with Matt Painter at the helm as well. And, you know, I think it's interesting. He mentioned they had to sit in it. And what he's referencing to is a season ago where they lose in the opening round to Fairleigh Dickinson. Only the second time that a 16 seed had defeated a number one. The first time being UMBC over Virginia back in 2018. And that's embarrassing for a program, especially one that is held in such high regard like Purdue is in men's college basketball, to be sent home that early and in that way when you're one of the teams that's projected to be in the mix for the Final Four. And they've had to deal with that for a year. And, you know, you don't have to be a fan of Purdue, but I get the motivating factor. And that's clearly a chip that they've had on their shoulder this entire season, trying to get back. And if they win 2 more games, then they'll have completed the UVA redemption story part 2 by doing the exact same things they did, because they went from losing that first round game to UMBC in 18 to running through and winning it all the next year. And again, Purdue very much in line to do the exact same thing. They're going to be playing the scrappiest team of the bunch, that being North Carolina State. And in fact, I mentioned Virginia. And it's very interesting because Virginia not only relates to Purdue in reference to what Purdue is doing and potentially making a run at the national championship, but Virginia also represents a pretty key moment in NC State's season. Let's go with cut number 21 here, Dave. Let's rewind back to the ACC semifinals just a couple of weeks ago.
And he missed it. 4 seconds. O'Connell gets it off. Oh! Michael O'Connell banks in a prayer to send this game to overtime.
You know, it's always funny to look back and think of moments that could change the course of history for a team or for a program, and then none bigger perhaps than there with NC State. That was against Virginia in the semifinals of the ACC tournament, a missed free throw that would have allowed Virginia to go up 56-52 with only a handful of seconds left. Gets missed. O'Connell takes it down to the other end of the court, drains that three, sends the game to overtime. Obviously, North Carolina State wins that game, proceeds to beat North Carolina in the ACC championship, and it's just been on a run ever since as they head in to their first Final Four since 1987. They'll go to toe-to-toe with Purdue coming up on Saturday night. And that's kind of one of those things, when you looked at their story, that, you know, I feel like by the time they got into the ACC championship game, most people were aware of what they were doing. And they rode a wave of momentum going into the NCAA tournament. But it's one of those things where you look at a team like that, coming in as the 11th seed, where it's like, and look, I hadn't picked in the first round. They took on Texas Tech, and I had them winning, which they obviously did. And it's one of those things where I'd be curious, at least the non-NC State fans, most people, if nothing else, maybe had them winning a game or two. But it's one of those things like, all right, well, and I don't even know if you can call them a Cinderella, right? Because they're a Power 5 program. But it's like, okay, well, the steam's got to run out at some point for these kind of stories. And, you know, they'll probably get bounced in the round of 32, maybe the Sweet 16 or something like that. But the magic hasn't run out yet. And now they're going to the Final Four. And, yes, it's a daunting task to take on Purdue, but everything's been a daunting task for them up to this point. And how about you? I'm riding the Wolfpack train, right? I'm all aboard seeing if they can complete this amazing journey to maybe being national champions, but not going to be easy taking on Purdue coming up on Saturday in the Final Four. On the other side of the bracket, Alabama also visiting their first Final Four as a program, and thanks in large part to what Nate Oates has been able to do as a head coach. Cut number 19 here, Dave. Here's what Nate Oates had to say about making the Final Four and what it means to him.
When I was a kid, big basketball fan. I used to, gonna date myself a little bit. You had the VHS tapes, so every time I had every one of the shining moments labeled on a VHS tape, so I could go back and watch that thing all summer. Then you start to grow up in the coaching profession and you just want to be at the Final Four, be in the hotel lobby so I can see the big name coaches that are there. And somehow I caught enough breaks. I'm coaching in one, which is unreal. I mean, give hope to a lot of high school coaches tonight, that's for sure. But I don't know if it's really hit me yet. It probably won't hit me until after the Final Four is over, because I'm going to enjoy it tonight a little bit, and then we got to try to figure out how to beat UConn, because they're pretty good. They went on a 30-0 run, I heard, tonight. Is that correct? That's unheard of in the Elite Eight. That's crazy.
For Nate Oates, what Alabama does in terms of how they play basketball is something that is, I don't want to say criticized, but something that people are very skeptical of when it comes to a tournament type setting. They are obviously a team that relies heavily on shooting the three ball. By the way, correction, I just saw this here. NC State's first Final Four appearance since 1983, not 1987. Just wanted to correct that. But as I mentioned, Alabama is a team that relies so much on shooting the three ball. People are often skeptical of how deep you can go into a tournament like the NCAA tournament, relying on that so much. And Nate Oates also spoke about this after the game as well, that, many people were critical of them a season ago, or after their exit from the tournament last year. They lost that game to San Diego State in the Sweet 16. They went 3 of 27. So it's like at some point your steam runs out, your magic runs out, and shooting that kind of or having that kind of offense isn't as effective. And lo and behold, up to this point, it's still working for them. And again, like everybody else, they win 2 more games. They are walking away with the national championship. But they're facing their tough competition so far this season, that being the defending national champion UConn Huskies. Dan Hurley is a unique personality, to say the least. At cut number 18 here, Dave, he says they've earned a level of respect because they're just that good. Cut 18 here, Dave. 18.
It was a tweet I got sent to me. Okay. I got a tweet, and, it's like I'm not on there a lot. I turn the notifications off, which, is a game changer for me. But, I like the slights. I like... I think there's obviously a lot of experts out there, and maybe, people that follow different conferences, haven't seen Big East basketball, but we're both on Fox. So Big Ten and Big East, they probably could have caught some more of those games. But we like those external things. Again, we were picked closer to 4th than we were 3rd in the Big East preseason polls by the coaches. So we any external that you give us, we heard the things the players were saying on the lead up to this one, and as defending national champs and what we've done since last February and how we've played in this tournament, we feel like we've earned a certain level of respect from media and opposing players when they face us right now, because we've been that good.
Dan Hurley, again, a unique personality as a coach. He's cocky, he's confident, but rightfully so. Obviously, they won a national championship a season ago. A lot of turnover on that team. People didn't know how good they were going to be. As he mentioned, they were picked to finish 3rd or 4th in the Big East. And now here they are in another Final Four with a chance to go back-to-back when it comes to national championships. And they have dispatched all their opponents pretty easily so far in this tournament. 91-52 against Stetson, 75-58 against Northwestern, 82-52 against San Diego State, and most recently over the weekend, 77-52 over Illinois. So just cruising through this tournament. Now they take on Alabama coming up on Saturday. The nightcap there out there in Phoenix to again get one step closer to reclaiming another claiming another national championship for the UConn men's basketball program. Should be an exciting one. Looking forward to it, and all the action to wrap up men's college basketball's 2023-2024 season. We'll jump back into baseball coming up. Jack Felcher from Gamecock Central was out there in Tuscaloosa over the weekend. He'll join us next to detail what happened with the Gamecocks and the Crimson Tide. That's coming up. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you on your Monday on the Game.
Change up cue ball up the third baseline. LeCroy fields and will have to hold on to it. Now they get McCants off the third. They throw behind him, and he's out. Oh, my gosh. The bizarre inning finally concludes in the most bizarre fashion. A swinging bunt from Evan Slight that was going to be an infield hit. LeCroy came and picked it up, faked the throw to first, turned around and saw that McCants had taken a big turn at third. Will Tippett snuck in behind him, and the throw back behind gets McCants.
Welcome back in. It's the Extra Points Hour ahead with you on this Monday morning. That, of course, Derek Scott on the call for the Gamecocks Radio Network on the wild final play that decided the third game of South Carolina picking up the 9-8 victory over Alabama out there in Tuscaloosa on Saturday. We'll get to that in just a moment as we welcome in Jack Veltri from Gamecock Central, as always. Talk a little bit of Carolina baseball. Jack, I do have to ask, the last time we talked after you made a road trip back from Alabama, you ran into some tire trouble. Did you at least make it back safely this time from Tuscaloosa?
Oh, gosh, man. Yeah, I made it back all right. I made it back in one piece, and, I was able to spend Easter with the family. So all is well on my end, and, I appreciate you having me on for another call here.
Very good. We heard that play there that ended the game on Saturday. It looked like South Carolina was getting ready to blow what was a 5-run lead going into that ninth inning. Walk us through not only your thought process watching that ninth inning unfold, but also that wild final play and the heads-upness of not only Talmadge LeCroy, but Will Tippett to get that final out.
I thought I was gonna have to start my story from scratch with that ninth inning, man. It was getting dicey there for a second. Look, Garrett Gainey pitched that ninth inning to start, and you gotta remember he pitched. I think he threw like maybe 24 pitches on Friday, so you knew he was kind of coming in with a little bit of a short rest, and he had just pitched the 8th inning too. So let's not forget that. So he was really kind of on his last leg there. And then, just Alabama just starts getting some runs and stuff, and then it all compiles into a situation where the tying and winning runs are on base, and it's like, oh, man, like, what's going to happen here? And thankfully, they took him out of the game. They decided to go with Chris Veach, and, it looked like Veach might be in trouble there for a second too, but he gets that ground ball, and then, right off the bat, you knew it was going to be an infield hit. There was no doubt about it. I think it really says a lot about Talmadge LeCroy to pump fake the throw to first because he knows he's not going to get the guy. Turn around and catch the runner that's on third, going a little too far off the bag, and Will Tippett's there sneaking behind him to make the tag and make the play. And it was a really, really good play. I didn't know if it was going to be overturned or not because it was on a review. But it was crazy. It was a lot to just set in with the mind, taking it all in, I guess. It was a crazy ninth inning.
Well, it kept South Carolina from getting swept. Did end up losing the series overall, but, winning one game is better than, losing all three of them. You mentioned Garrett Gainey a moment ago, who did come in that the 8th inning, and then, got replaced by Veach there at the very end to get that last out. But he's a guy that has been so lights out for this team so far this season. We talked about it, in the past couple weeks leading up that the one run he had surrendered been that home run against Clemson, but really had not given up much of anything since then. Comes in on Friday night, gives up a couple hits, gives up a run, and then comes in on Thursday night, and then comes in on Saturday. And as you mentioned, maybe a little bit of fatigue factor there. What do you make of this? Is this just running into a really good offense in Alabama that maybe he's not seen quite to this point, or is this something that could be a sign of things to come?
I think it's a combination of Alabama having a really good offense. And then, look, I think it's very unrealistic to say that he was going to be lights out all year. I think in very rare cases you have guys that end up pitching to an ERA under 1 the entire season. In the pros and college baseball, I think that's very tough. And at some point, he was going to run into trouble where he's going to get hit around a little bit. He's a very, very, very good left-handed pitcher, throws really hard, has good off-speed stuff. But, at some point, there's going to be a guy or someone out there that is able to catch up to it and make you pay a little bit. And I guess it was also, you have to factor in that he pitched so much this weekend. He pitched, I believe, he pitched at least, 3 innings this weekend? That could be a lot for a reliever. And the fact that Alabama already saw him on Friday just shows that, they were able to figure his stuff out by Sunday. And you got to get props for it too. Alabama definitely tagged him in that 9th inning, but at the same time, I wouldn't be worried long term. I think Gainey's going to be fine as the season goes along. He's been really good so far, and this is just one blemish on what has been a really outstanding first year at South Carolina for him.
Again, talking to our guy, Jack Felcher from Gamecock Central, recapping the weekend that was in Carolina baseball. And flipping over the offense now, Gavin Cassis ends up with one of the best marks as far as hitters from the weekend, going 357 with 2 RBIs and 1 home run, piggybacking off of what was another solid performance for him last weekend against Vanderbilt. He kind of had a rough start to the season. What are you seeing out of Gavin Cassis that kind of seems to that's seeing him finally click in gear a little bit over these past couple of series?
Yeah, I think he's. I think the thing that Mark Kingston was telling me is that Gavin's kind of been hitting against left-handers, starting against left-handers, and then with righties, it's more like Tyler Causey, and I think that's a good problem to have when you're able to match up those two guys, because I mean you definitely want both their bats in the lineup at the same time, but I mean when push comes to shove, if you have to start one over the other, I think I like the idea of having Gavin against lefties. At some point he's going to be able to hit against righties, right? I think that's at some point he's just got too much power in his bat not to be able to do so, and I think combined with a good glove, I mean, look, he's taking better at bats. I was very critical of it didn't matter at the end of the day because South Carolina won on Saturday, but there was a situation, I believe in like the 5th or 4th inning, where South Carolina had a few guys on base. They were down. They had just scored 3 runs, and they were going to be able to potentially tie the game or whatever. And then Gavin lays down a bunt first pitch and he fouls it off, and I'm like, wait, what? This is a guy that literally came about a foot from hitting a home run in his first at bat, and then he had I think he had really hit off. He had hit like a single in the second at bat or something. So he's been tagging Alabama all day, and then it's just like, what are you bunting for in that situation? And then he goes on to strike out. So I think he's been swinging very well. He ended up getting another hit later in the game, but I mean, what can you say? I mean, you want him to start swinging better, and when he is, I mean, it really goes a long way for the entire lineup.
Last one for you here. Got right about 2 minutes. When they're on the road, they don't always post Coach Kingston's post-game press availability. So I'm curious, what were Kingston's thoughts overall on the weekend when it was all said and done?
Yeah, and I think this shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone. It's tough to win on the road in the SEC. Every game's tough. I mean, South Carolina is fortunate to come away with at least one win. I know in the whole bigger picture that fans are going to be disappointed that South Carolina lost 2 of 3 and that it's back to Kingston being fired and this and that, but I think he's got them going in the right direction. I mean, look, they were in a tie game in the 8th inning on Friday, and it just slipped away with Matthew Becker kind of I don't want to say going over his pitch count, but kind of facing Alabama, I think like 2nd or 3rd time through the order or whatever, and then Parker Marlott comes in and also doesn't pitch well. So it's just, look, I mean, South Carolina's going to be fine. Kingston had a lot of good things to say about, this win on Saturday really kind of helps make you feel better about everything, right? Because now they're 5-4 in league play. They, have a confidence-boosting win on a really big play to end the game. And now you go into a week where you're getting Georgia Southern, and then you get a good Texas A&M team at home in Columbia. So I think while it is tough to lose a series, you don't ever want to lose a series. The important thing is you didn't get swept, and you managed to take the final game of the series, which can really help be a confidence boost. I mean, look at what happened with the Ole Miss series. You drop the first 2 games, and then you play a lot better in Game 3, and then you go on to win, I believe, 6 games in a row. So, look, it's a long season. It's baseball. Things are going to happen, and you just got to kind of roll with the punches and, make the most of what you got.
Absolutely. We'll check in on you with a little bit later on in the week and get set for the A&M series coming up this weekend at Founders Park. Appreciate it as always, Jack.
Appreciate it, my man. Thank you so much.
And Jack Felcher from Gamecock Central, again, checking in once again for Gamecock Baseball. We'll come back, wrap up today's edition of The Extra Point. Speaking of baseball, Major League Baseball's opening weekend was this past weekend. Braves in action taking on the Phillies. We'll dive through that and what happened with the Braves up in Philadelphia. Coming up, it's The Extra Point. Tyler Head along with you. Cap Dave on the other side of the glass here on The Game. Welcome back in. Tyler Head along with you here on the Extra Point. Captain Dave producing on the other side of the glass, wrapping up today's edition of the show. And as always, Wes Crystal jumping here with me in the top of the 11 o'clock hour for the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. We'll dive back into plenty of conversation about women's basketball, making yet another Final Four appearance. I want to remind you real quick about the craft beer card. It is back. You can spend $30 at a brewery at 12 craft beer locations. It's a $360 value for only $79. Go online to 1075thegame.com and click on the Sweet Deals tab for your chance or for your ability to purchase the craft beer card. One hit a Firehouse Subs text real quick. Firehouse Subs text on 803-404-6100. Clemson Wayne weighs in reference to Purdue and NC State taking each other on in the Final Four. Battle of the big guys. Couple of the guys that I talked a little bit earlier between Zach Edey and DJ Burns are going to be going head to head for the opportunity to go play for the national championship. And it's really funny because Zach Edey may be one of the few guys that can make DJ Burns look small. He's got 7-8 inches on him. That's going to be an interesting matchup, and see how those two guys pair up with each other coming up on Saturday night in the Final Four for the chance to go play for the national championship. As I mentioned, the Atlanta Braves got their season rolling this past weekend. Of course, Friday afternoon ended up being their opening day after Thursday got postponed because of rain. Go up to Philadelphia, pick up 2 wins out of the 3 on the weekend, 9-3 on Friday, 12-4 on Saturday, really opened things up offensively in the late stages of that game, and then unfortunately fell 5-4 yesterday out in Philadelphia. But again, at the end of the day, as long as you're winning the series, that is all that mattered. Thought Spencer Strider looked pretty good through his first outing this past Friday. Ends up with 8 strikeouts, only surrendered 2 runs. One of those being to the home run that he surrendered in that game. So not a bad outing overall. As I mentioned, 8 strikeouts in total. As far as the starting pitching goes for the rest of the weekend, Freed didn't have really a great outing on Saturday. Didn't even get through a full inning. Just really had trouble with command on his ball. Ended up walking 3 guys, and like I said, didn't even make it out of the first inning before Jesse Chavez had to come in with a little bit of long relief. He was able to put together 3 very solid innings for the Braves, and the rest of the bullpen, followed suit. And again, the offense opened things up for that 12-4 win. Chris Sale is somebody that Braves fans have been very interested in watching for the first time as a Brave. Obviously was a very high-level pitcher for the Red Sox for so many years. These past couple of years been dealing with a lot of injuries. And the question was how he was going to perform coming in here to Atlanta to be with the Braves. And goes out there yesterday for his first start of the season. Pitches 5 1/3, 5 hits, 2 runs, 7 strikeouts, and did surrender the 1 home run. So not a bad start for Chris Sale in his first game as a Brave. Things unfortunately got away from the Braves yesterday. Later on in the game, when Bummer came in, he had appeared on Friday as well. Came in for his second appearance as a Brave. Ended up giving up 4 hits and 2 runs, and that got things a little bit out of reach for the Braves. But again, coming away with the series victory is the most important thing at the at the end of the day. Ronald Acuna Jr. starting off the season about where he left off, from last year. Ended up going 4 for 17 on the weekend, hitting 417 on the weekend with 1 RBI, a couple of stolen bases in there as well. Michael Harris Jr., really strong start to the season with 2 RBIs and a home run over the course of the 3 games. The big concern coming away from the weekend, though, was Sean Murphy, the catcher, suffering the oblique injury in game number 1. And obviously he put together a good season in his first year as a Brave last year. So he's going to be on the shelf for a little bit. You have Travis d'Arnaud, who was already the second catcher, kind of sliding into that main role, and then Chadwick Tromp, who getting called back up from the from AAA Gwinnett, going to be filling that role while Sean Murphy is on the shelf for a short period of time. So good way to start the season off for the Braves, getting 2 out of 3 against the much hated Philadelphia Phillies, and they now head on the road once again, taking on the White Sox. That game number 1 of that series coming up later this afternoon up there in Chicago. They'll be back this weekend for the first home series out there in Truist Park. That'll do it for today's edition of The Extra Point. Again, coming up next, the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Myself, Wes Mitchell, and Chris Clark here on The Game.